My daughter-in-law stole my credit card and blew $97,000 in one day. The next day, she sent a yacht selfie, draped in gold, with the caption, "You're such an angel, Ellen, winky face." I smiled. She had no idea that card was about to destroy her life. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here to listen. Stay here with me through this whole story and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my stories travel. You should know, Jasmine didn't use just any credit card. She used the one tied to the business Malcolm and I built from the ground up. And that was her first mistake. That little yacht selfie, that was the moment she signed her own downfall. And honey, you better believe I kept the receipts. She thought she was living her best life. She had no idea it was already over. So if you want to know how she went from a yacht to a free fall, come back with me. It started with an email from the bank. 6:42 a.m. Subject line, unusual activity detected, EB/Bradford Interiors Holdings. I almost didn't open it. I assumed it was spam. Then I saw the total, $97,800. Cleared. No authorization requested. My vision blurred. I clicked to expand the statement, and the world tilted. Dubai Atlantis Hotel, $12,000. Gulf Gold and Jewels, $33,200. Seven Seas Cruise, owner's deck, $28,000. Spa Luxe, Palm Island, $3,000. Boutique Gifts, $1,600. Then my phone pinged, a photo from Jasmine. She was reclining on a white yacht, sunglasses on, diamond-studded bikini strap catching the light. The caption burned into my screen, "You're such an angel, Ellen, winky face." I sat down, but not from shock, from clarity, because the card she used wasn't my personal one. It was tied to the business Malcolm and I built from scratch, and still legally active, which meant what she'd done wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. Malcolm and I started Bradford Interiors in 1983, built it from scratch, built it with love. By the time he passed in 2017, we had 8 employees and a waiting list 6 months long. When he died, I couldn't bear to shut it all down, so I kept the name, kept the LLC, kept one business card active just in case. Grant, my son, had been helping me tie up the final accounts. So yes, he had access. Jasmine did not. So when she used that card, the one still protected by federal business audit requirements, she didn't just steal, she left a digital paper trail. Each charge was labeled client relations or vendor hosting. That's how I knew it wasn't impulse, it was a plan. I closed the bank tab and walked to the kitchen window. My fingers brushed the handle of the old tea kettle, Malcolm's kettle. I hadn't used it in months. Outside, the magnolia tree was blooming. The blossoms had come in early this year, but I barely noticed them. All I could see was that image of Jasmine on the yacht, wearing diamonds, mocking me. I wasn't even surprised. I was just done. Done with the smiling and done with the nodding, done with the desperate trying. Because for 3 years, I'd smiled while she insulted me, laughed while she cut me out of photos, swallowed my pride while she rolled her eyes at my stories. But now I had something she didn't know I had. Leverage and a perfect little folder already started in my filing cabinet marked, "If they ever cross the line." I didn't cry. Not when I saw the charges. Not when Jasmine sent that photo. Not even when I realized how easily she'd fooled me. What I felt was heavier than sadness. It was the kind of cold that sinks into your ribs and stays there. I sat in the kitchen with the bank statement on my screen and the taste of metal in my mouth. The same kitchen where Malcolm used to dance with me while the coffee brewed, where we hosted Christmas breakfasts and argued over paint samples. He would have called this a test of character. I would have called it betrayal. There were so many little betrayals leading up to this, I could have paved the driveway with them. Jasmine pretending not to hear me. Jasmine calling me adorable when I tried to share a memory. Jasmine buying Grant a smartwatch for his birthday and giving me a pot holder shaped like a pig. I told myself those things didn't matter, but they did. I opened my messages and scrolled. I'd saved every conversation with her since the wedding. I don't know why. Maybe I sensed it. Maybe some part of me knew I'd need a record someday. Her tone had always been sugar-coated with something bitter underneath. "So thoughtful of you to remember our anniversary. Grant said you were still sharp." Loved the casserole last night. Retro is back in, LOL. We were just saying how hard you try. I used to lie awake wondering if I was imagining the malice behind her words. Now I knew better. Now I had proof. I clicked back to the charges. One stood out more than the others. $28,000. Seven Seas cruise, owner's deck, departure in 10 days. They weren't just spending the money, they were running. A luxury cruise through the Gulf, champagne on call, full butler service. It was a fantasy getaway, paid for by my company's card. And here's the thing Jasmine didn't know. The owner's deck on a cruise line like that requires identification, passport, address, confirmation documents. That meant the cruise line had her full name and itinerary, and that meant I could get it. She'd left fingerprints all over the crime scene. I stood up and walked into the study. The filing cabinet was under the printer, nearly forgotten. I unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out the old business folder. EB/Bradford Interiors. My name was still the principal. The account hadn't been dissolved. Grant was an authorized user. But Jasmine? Nothing. Not a signature. Not a name. Not a single legal foothold. She'd impersonated a company officer to book a business expense. That was a felony. I slipped the folder into my tote bag and felt the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just a woman with graying hair and casseroles. I was the co-founder of a firm that had designed for 3 Fortune 500 CEOs and once had a 2-year wait list. I'd stared down real estate tycoons and developers who thought they could outmaneuver me. Jasmine thought she'd taken something from me, but what she'd actually done was remind me who I used to be. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The wind had picked up. The magnolia branches swayed like they were waving me forward. I looked out across the backyard, the one Malcolm had landscaped with his bare hands, brick by brick. There was a time I used to feel safe here, not anymore. That wasn't Jasmine's fault, not entirely. It was time that had done that, time and grief and the quiet erosion of respect that happens when people stop seeing you as a whole person. Jasmine didn't just take money, she took something deeper, the belief that I still mattered, that I still had teeth. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went back inside. I made tea. Not the boxed kind she once rolled her eyes at, but the loose-leaf Darjeeling Malcolm had brought back from Delhi. I let it steep until the color turned deep red. I drank it slowly while I made a list. Names, dates, documents, and one very specific contact at the cruise line's legal department. A woman I'd once designed an office for. I was going to need copies of Jasmine's booking paperwork, and I had a feeling they'd be happy to send them once they understood what I was investigating. Because Jasmine had made it personal. Now, so would I. It wasn't just the money. That's what people never understand. It's never just the money. It's the way you're made to feel like a relic in your own life, like something that can be shuffled aside with polite smiles and passive insults. Jasmine had been doing it for years. I just hadn't seen it clearly. Or maybe I had, and I just didn't want to admit my own son let her get away with it. The first time I should have known was their wedding. Jasmine had asked me to wear pale blue to match the hydrangeas, she'd said. What she hadn't said was that the bridal party was wearing cream, ivory, and gold. My blue dress stuck out like a bruised thumb in every photo. That's if I was even in the photo. Half the pictures online. I wasn't in them at all, not even the family ones. Oh, the photographer must have missed that one, Jasmine had said sweetly when I brought it up. But the photos she had posted were perfectly curated, just her, Grant, and her side of the family, like they were the whole story. Then came the first Christmas. I'd hand-stitched a shawl for her. I don't knit much, but Malcolm's mother had taught me how, and I wanted to pass that along. I used silk yarn, not cheap, in a rich emerald green, because she'd once mentioned loving that color. She opened it, gave a polite smile, and said, "Oh, I didn't know people still made things like this." Then she handed it to Grant and moved on to her next gift. Weeks later, when I visited for dinner, I saw it folded in the back of their hallway closet, still in the tissue paper I'd wrapped it in. She hadn't even taken it out. But it wasn't until Mother's Day 2 years ago that I realized how intentional it all was. I'd spent the whole morning making Grant's favorite meal: chicken cordon bleu, roasted garlic potatoes, peach cobbler. I even took my grandmother's china down from the high shelf. Jasmine walked in, took one look at the spread, and said, "This is so charming. It's like stepping into a time capsule." Then she pulled out her phone and started filming. She posted it on her Instagram with the caption, "Brunch with the vintage generation, heart emoji, home style, blast from the past." I sat there watching Grant laugh at her jokes, and I felt like I'd just been turned into a meme. But the worst of it, the part that kept me up at night, wasn't what Jasmine did. It was what she made Grant do, or rather, not do, not defend me, not notice, not ask why I looked smaller in every room when she was around. He used to call me twice a week. After they got married, it became once a month, then once every 6 weeks, always quick, always rushed, and always with Jasmine's voice floating somewhere in the background, like a perfume that lingered even after the call ended. There were signs. God, there were so many signs. The time she reorganized my pill cabinet and then told Grant she was worried I'd mixed up my blood pressure medication. The time I repeated a story at dinner just once, and she patted my hand and said, "You've told us that before, Ellen. Maybe it's time we talk about some support options." Support options, like I was failing, like I couldn't live in my own house anymore. That same week, she printed out brochures for senior condos and left them in my mailbox with a Post-it, "Just ideas, heart emoji." And when Grant saw them, he looked at me with that tight-lipped, gentle expression children reserve for the elderly, like I was drifting away and Jasmine was the lighthouse trying to guide me back. I knew what she was doing, I just didn't have the words for it yet. The theft only confirmed what had been happening in slow motion, not a robbery, but a quiet erasure of my dignity, my authority, myself. She wanted the house. She wanted my name off the business. She wanted access to my accounts, but with a sympathetic smile and 1,000 plausible excuses. Now I understood. It was never about one big moment. It was about layering small manipulations until I couldn't tell if I was paranoid or perceptive, and it nearly worked. But that card, that one slip, had pulled the curtain down. Now I could see the full stage. And Jasmine, she wasn't just a spoiled daughter-in-law anymore. She was a strategist, and I was going to treat her like one. The phone rang just after 9. Grant. I'd been expecting it. I almost didn't answer. But then I thought, no, let's hear what version of reality Jasmine fed him. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. He hesitated. "Hey, Mom, listen. I need to ask you something. Jasmine's upset. She says you're accusing her of stealing your card." I said nothing. My breath caught in my chest. That's where we were starting. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Just defense. I closed my eyes. "Did you see the charges, Grant?" She showed me the statement. "Yeah, but she said you offered to pay for our trip, that it was an anniversary gift. She said you handed her the card yourself." I felt like someone had punched the air out of me. "And you believed that?" "I mean, she showed me your texts." His voice faltered for a second, and I jumped on it. "What texts?" "On Sunday night after dinner. You told her she deserved to be pampered." I stood up, heart pounding. "I said that over salad, Grant. It was a comment, not a contract. And I certainly never gave her a corporate credit card." There was silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end. "Maybe you forgot," he said finally. "You've been under a lot of stress lately, and Dr. Selby did say grief can impact memory." My mouth went dry. So that was the plan. Confuse the timeline, use my widowhood, weaponize my age. I sank back into the chair and gripped the armrest. "I may be grieving," I said, "but I am not confused. I did not give her that card. I did not authorize $97,000 in luxury spending, and you know it." He exhaled sharply. "Mom, maybe we talk about this when we get back. I don't want to ruin our trip over a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding, that word again, the one that shrinks theft into a minor slip. "Grant," I said, voice low, "this wasn't an accident. You need to look in Jasmine's luggage when you get home. Look at the jewelry. Then ask yourself if this sounds like a mix-up. or a woman who thinks she'll never be held accountable. He didn't respond. I heard traffic in the background, a horn, some laughing, and I knew he was standing on a balcony somewhere, looking out at the glittering skyline of a city I'd once dreamed of visiting with Malcolm. She said it was just a few thousand, he murmured. A hotel, some souvenirs. That bracelet she posted, I said. The one she flashed on Instagram yesterday? That was 33,000. Gulf gold and jewels. Dubai Marina, itemized under client entertainment. Silence. Something shifted in his voice. Client entertainment? She used the business account, Grant, the corporate card, the one with your name on it. That landed. I could hear it in how quiet he went. I could feel him doing the math, realizing what it meant, not just morally, but legally. She didn't know, he said after a moment, almost to himself. She probably thought it was your personal card. Then she shouldn't be using any card. That's the point. I never gave it to her, and if she forged texts, that's another level entirely. His voice was smaller now. I'll talk to her. No, I said, you listen to me. You figure out where you stand. I'm not going to be gaslit in my own home, not after everything I've done for you. Mom, when you get back, we talk, all three of us. But you better come prepared, Grant, because I will be. I hung up. My hand shook as I set the phone down, but not from nerves, from fury, deep-rooted, patient fury. I'd carried you for 9 months, Grant. I fed you, bathed you, stayed up through fevers and heartaches. I walked into your father's funeral with your hand in mine, promising I'd hold our family together. And now you were standing next to a woman who took everything we built, everything your father bled for, and spent it on a spa facial and a luxury suite. And you weren't even sure if I was telling the truth? I stood up and walked to the fridge, pulled out the bottle of chilled white wine I'd been saving, poured exactly 1 inch into a glass, and stared out the window while I drank it slowly. It tasted sour. I dumped the rest. I wasn't going to numb this. I was going to remember it. Every word, every silence, every moment I was made to feel like I imagined this. Because when Jasmine got back, I was going to remind her exactly who she'd underestimated. And I wasn't going to do it with tears. I was going to do it with documents. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, tilted just so in that yacht photo, her smirk framed by diamond earrings and a cocktail glass. It wasn't the jewelry. It was the satisfaction in her expression, the certainty that I'd never challenge her, that I'd roll over. I was done rolling over. At 3:14 a.m., I turned on the kitchen light and powered up my laptop. The glow lit up the room, bouncing off the old watercolor Malcolm had painted years ago. A village street in Florence. I used to love that painting. Lately, I barely noticed it. I logged into my bank account. Personal first, then business. I opened the PDF of the last 6 months of corporate card statements. I expected to see the Dubai charges, but what I found went deeper. It hadn't started with a cruise. It had started with probing. Small charges camouflaged, spaced out. $280 at a boutique home goods store. $612 at a high-end brunch spot Grant had once told me they couldn't afford. $1,400 to a spa I'd never heard of. At first, I thought maybe Grant had made some of the purchases, but then I spotted a pattern. Every charge lined up with Jasmine's Instagram timeline. I scrolled her page. There was the brunch photo. Treating myself, because why not? There was the rooftop pool, tagged at the exact hotel I saw on the statement. There was a new handbag, captioned #blessed #bossbabe. Purchased 3 days earlier under business supplies. It was all there, right in the open. She didn't even try to hide it. Over 6 months, she'd spent nearly $75,000, and not on business, on herself. Designer shoes, jewelry, travel, spa treatments, brunches, every one of them marked as a legitimate business expense, logged on an account that had both my name and Grant's. That meant I wasn't just looking at theft. I was looking at fraud, with potential consequences not just for me, but for him too. I should have felt panicked. Instead, I felt something new. Purpose. I clicked open a Word document and began taking notes. Date, vendor, amount, item, corresponding Instagram post. I wasn't going to confront her with emotion. I was going to confront her with evidence. Then I noticed something else. The card wasn't just used for personal gain, it was misclassified deliberately. The $1,200 spa charge was filed under client hospitality, the boutique jewelry under vendor gifts, the brunches as team building. Someone had gone into the expense portal and manually changed those categories. That wasn't accidental, that was intentional. And I knew one thing for sure: Grant hadn't done it. He never bothered with receipts, never learned how to use the software properly. That had always been my job. Jasmine, however, had a background in PR and marketing. She knew how to craft a story, and she'd been crafting this one for months. I leaned back in my chair. The kitchen was cold, the tile floor biting into my feet. I didn't move. I just stared at the screen, hand resting on the mouse. The documents in front of me now forming something more than a spreadsheet. It was a blueprint, a map of premeditated manipulation, and the Dubai charges. That wasn't the beginning. It was the end game. She thought she'd won. She thought I was slow, distracted, grieving. And honestly, she was right. For a while, but not anymore. Because now I had 6 months of transactions matched to social media posts paired with fraudulent categorization. She'd buried herself in plain sight. And when I was ready, really ready, I'd make sure she understood exactly what she'd done. Not just to my money, but to my name, to my business, to my son. I closed the laptop gently, the way you'd close a casket. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, I got dressed like I was going to war, not in a suit of armor, but something just as symbolic: my old Navy pantsuit. Tailored, crisp, it still fit. I hadn't worn it since Malcolm's funeral, but today wasn't for mourning. Today was for reclaiming something. I pinned my silver hair back neatly and added the brooch Malcolm gave me the year we signed our first $1 million contract. Then I called a car, my destination, the old Bradford Interiors office downtown. The firm had downsized after Malcolm died, but the shell remained. A small corner suite in a building we used to own before we sold it. The receptionist, Kelly, looked up from her desk as I stepped off the elevator. Her eyes widened. "Ellen, oh, wow, we weren't expecting you. I need to see Allison." "Of course," she said, reaching for the phone. "She's in conference, but..." "Tell her it's urgent," I said, with a calm that felt like steel in my throat. 5 minutes later, Allison stepped out into the hallway, blouse slightly rumpled from a long meeting, glasses on her head. "Ellen, is everything all right?" "Walk with me," I said. We went into the old executive boardroom, the one with the dark walnut table Malcolm and I had picked out together from a craftsman in Vermont. I took a seat at the head of the table. Allison sat across from me, eyes narrowing with concern. "I need you to pull the last 8 months of transactions from the business account. Every charge, especially anything labeled client experience, hospitality, or vendor relations." "Okay," she said slowly, opening her laptop. "Can I ask what's going on?" "There's been unauthorized use, approximately $75,000. I believe it was my daughter-in-law. She is not listed on the account, but the charges were labeled to look legitimate. Someone's been laundering purchases through the expense system." Allison stopped typing. "That's serious. If that's true, it's not just misuse. That's fraud." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here." She pulled up the statements and turned the screen toward me. It was all there. The same charges I'd seen at home, only now color-coded by expense type. "This one," she pointed. "Gulf Gold and Jewels. That's categorized under client gifting." I nodded. She wore the purchase on her wrist in a vacation photo. "And this cruise, it's tagged as Leadership Retreat." "There was no retreat," I said. "There was just a suite, champagne, and a woman who thought I was too weak to notice." Allison leaned back, brows drawn together. "If this goes to audit, you're protected. But Grant, he's still listed as an authorized user. If he knew what she was doing..." "He didn't," I said without hesitation. "Not fully. But he didn't ask questions either. She didn't say anything, just nodded like she'd seen this kind of thing before. "We'll need to freeze the account," she said, "and document everything before the quarterly close. Do you want legal involved yet?" "Not yet," I said. "Give me 24 hours, then do what you have to do." "That gives us just enough time to gather a clean fraud packet," she said. "The IRS doesn't play around when it comes to business abuse, especially if it crosses state or international lines." She was all business now, clicking through reports, flagging every suspicious charge. I watched her work, feeling oddly calm. It was out of my hands soon, and yet, very much in them. This wasn't about revenge, it was about identity. I had let myself become background music in my own story. The aging mother, the fading presence, the woman to be managed. But Jasmine had just reminded me what it meant to be seen. And the next time she looked at me, it wouldn't be with condescension, it would be with fear. Because the house she thought she was quietly stealing, the one she laughed about selling, still mine. The account she drained, still traceable. The business she thought was dead, still breathing. And me, still here, with a pen, with a lawyer, and a signature that still meant something. I hadn't used the spare key in over a year. Grant gave it to me after they moved in, back when we still called each other once a week, and Jasmine pretended to care what kind of wine I liked. I stood on their porch for a full minute before unlocking the door, not because I felt guilty, I didn't, but because I knew that once I stepped inside, I couldn't unsee whatever I was about to find. The house was spotless, expensive, cold. It looked like a showroom, not a home. Every piece of furniture screamed curated luxury: white marble counters, black leather dining chairs, art that matched nothing except price tags. I didn't know the brand names, but I knew the feeling. This was the kind of place you built for show, not for comfort. I walked through the living room slowly. The walls were filled with photos. Jasmine and Grant on vacation, Jasmine at galas, Jasmine standing in front of things, vineyards, fountains, luxury stores. There was one photo of the two of them with friends in Napa, none with me, none with Malcolm, none from the wedding that didn't look filtered and retouched within an inch of its life. I made my way to the kitchen. That's where I saw it. A stack of unopened bills on the counter, some still in their envelopes, others marked with red stickers. Final notice, past due, car loan, credit card, mortgage, one from a luxury car dealership addressed to Jasmine, threatening repossession. They were drowning. Behind the curated image and the gold-plated vacation, they were unraveling. I opened a drawer and found a small safe, not locked, just tucked away. Inside was a velvet jewelry box, heavy. I lifted the lid. There it was, the bracelet, the earrings, a matching necklace. I flipped through the receipts she'd kept, stupidly, tucked beneath a folder labeled financial planning. And that's when I saw it. Printouts of my property records, screenshots of my home's estimated market value, copies of Malcolm's obituary with key sentences underlined, founded Bradford Interiors with his wife, retired after a lucrative 30-year career, then a note, handwritten, Jasmine's script, looped and elegant. Timeline, established signs of forgetfulness, memory gaps, medication confusion, begin narrative by spring. Add Grant to accounts by summer, power of attorney by Christmas, full financial access within 18 months. I stood there, frozen, reading it once, twice, a third time. It wasn't just theft, it was a plan. A full strategy to isolate me, discredit me, absorb me into her portfolio like I was an asset to be acquired. She hadn't been improvising, she'd been staging. The scarves, the brochures, the comments about my memory, they weren't slips. They were scripts. And I'd been following along like a background actor in a show about my own decline. I took photos of everything. Folder open, pages spread, jewelry exposed. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from anger. The quiet, steady kind that builds until it becomes fuel. I put everything back the way I found it, closed the safe, straightened the folder, tucked the receipts exactly where she had them. Then I walked through the house one last time, past the gleaming kitchen, past the mirror-perfect dining table, past the photo of her in Santorini, captioned, manifested this life. I stepped out into the evening air and locked the door behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew who she was now, knew what she wanted, and knew exactly how to take it all away. Quietly, legally, and completely. Sunday came with an autumn chill in the air, the kind that curled into your bones and made the kitchen smell like memories. I made pot roast, the same recipe Grant loved as a boy, the same one I made the day Malcolm told me we'd landed our first six-figure client. The smell filled the house, warm and familiar. But tonight wasn't about comfort. It was about truth. I set the table with my mother's silver, lit 2 candles, laid out the linen napkins Jasmine once called quaint. I wasn't staging this for them. I was doing it for myself, to reclaim my space, my voice, my role as matriarch, not a relic, not a prop, but a force. They arrived exactly at 6, Jasmine in heels and a dress I recognized, a sleek red number tagged to a $2,800 charge from Marina Lux. She wore the diamond bracelet like it was armor. Grant looked tired, older than his age. His eyes flickered across the room like he wasn't sure where to stand. I smiled and opened the door. "You both look lovely," I said. "Come in. Dinner's ready." Jasmine air-kissed my cheek. Her perfume was sharp, floral, expensive. "We missed you," she said sweetly. "Hope you weren't too worried. I know how anxiety can sneak up, especially at your age." I nodded politely. Let her get it all out. Let her play innocent while she still could. "Of course," I said. "Let's eat." We sat. We passed the potatoes. They made small talk about their trip, the food, the heat, the cruise staff who treated them like royalty. I let her talk, let her gloat. And then, just as she took another bite of roast, I placed a folder beside her plate. Neat, plain, unlabeled. She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "What's this?" she asked, still smiling. "Documentation," I said softly. "A conversation starter." Her smile faltered, and for the first time all evening, I saw her blink. Jasmine didn't open the folder right away. She glanced at Grant, then back at me, lips still curved into that carefully managed smile. "I'm not sure I understand," she said lightly. "Is this something for us to look at later?" "No," I said, "now." Grant looked uneasy. He reached for his water glass. "Mom, what is this?" "Statements," I said. "Receipts, screenshots, a timeline. You'll want to start with page 3. Jasmine finally flipped the folder open. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second. By the third, her hand froze. Grant leaned in to see. "What is this?" "A breakdown of every charge made on the Bradford Interiors business account over the last 8 months, I said. Cross-referenced with Instagram posts, expense categorizations, and your wife's travel itinerary. "Wait," he said slowly. "Business account?" You thought wrong," I said. "She didn't use my personal card. She used the company's corporate card, the one still registered under my name, the one still legally active, the one the IRS audits quarterly." Jasmine's mouth opened, then closed. Her color shifted. Ellen, I didn't realize. You thought I was too old to notice," I said, voice even. "You thought I wouldn't know how to pull the records, or track the metadata on the photos, or notice that you filed a spa day under vendor relations." Grant stared at the page in front of him. "Is this real?" he asked. These charges, they're in my name." "Authorized user," I said. "That's what you are. You signed off on the access when you helped me close the last contract. But she made the purchases, not you, though if you knew and didn't stop her." "I didn't," he said quickly. "I swear, Mom, I didn't know she was using the business card." Jasmine snapped the folder shut. "Okay, this is ridiculous," she said, voice sharp now. "I thought it was the other card, the one you always carry. This is a mix-up." $75,000 isn't a mix-up, I said. "That's a campaign. That's a strategy. And I know it wasn't an accident, because I saw the file in your safe." Jasmine's head whipped around. "You what?" "While you were sunning yourself on a cruise suite paid for by someone else's money, I used the spare key your husband gave me." "That's illegal," she hissed. So is corporate fraud, I said coolly. So is forging financial documentation. So is impersonating a company officer. But you weren't worried about that when you wrote out a timeline of how you planned to chip away at my mental capacity to get power of attorney by Christmas. Grant turned to her, stunned. What is she talking about? Don't, I said, pulling my phone from my bag. I tapped twice and held it out. Here, take a look. He took the phone. On the screen were photos of Jasmine's handwriting, the folder, the printouts of my home's value, the obituaries, the strategy list with target dates and underlined phrases like establish confusion and position as caregiver. He scrolled in silence, his face drained. When he spoke, his voice cracked. You were planning to take over her estate. No, Jasmine said quickly. It wasn't like that. I was just preparing for the future in case she needed help, that's all. You were researching how to discredit her, Grant said, to make it seem like she was losing her memory. You left brochures for assisted living. You staged all of that. You said she was lonely. You said she wasn't doing well on her own, Jasmine snapped. I was trying to protect you. By stealing from her? Silence. It stretched, grew heavy. Jasmine's breath came in short bursts. She turned to me. What do you want? Huh? You want me to grovel? To apologize? No, I said. I want accountability. I pulled another folder from the sideboard and laid it on the table. Here are your options. 1. Sign a confession acknowledging your unauthorized use of the Bradford Interiors business account and agree to repay every cent, plus interest, over the next 5 years. 2. We take this to court, and you deal with the IRS, the fraud division, and the public record of prosecution. Jasmine stared at the second folder like it was a bomb. You can't do this. I can, I said, and I will. Grant, she said, turning to him, you're really going to let her do this to me? He shook his head, stunned. You did this to yourself. She stood up abruptly, her chair screeching back. This is insane. No, I said. This is reality. The one you've been rewriting for months, maybe longer. You wanted to erase me. Now I'm making sure you can't. She stared at the documents. You'll regret this, both of you. You think I'm the villain here? You think she didn't want us to use that money? Look at her, alone in that house, clinging to some old business and a dead husband. She needs us. No, I said calmly. What I need is peace. And you've done everything in your power to rob me of it. But that ends now. I looked at Grant. This is your marriage, your decision. But if she doesn't sign, I'll file the report by morning. He nodded, still reeling. Understood. Jasmine grabbed her purse. I need time. You have 48 hours, I said. And one more thing. She paused. Stay out of my house, out of my life. No more pretending. No more holidays. No more games. You can't cut me out. Watch me, I said. She left without another word. And for the first time in years, the house felt still, not empty. Still, like something had been pulled out by the root, and now there was space to breathe. Grant sat down again. He looked older, like a boy who'd wandered too far into the woods and just realized he was lost. I should have seen it, he said. I'm so sorry. I reached across the table and took his hand. We all go blind when we love the wrong person. What matters is how we come back once the fog lifts. He squeezed my hand. Outside, the wind had picked up. The candles on the table flickered, then went out. We sat in the quiet, surrounded by cold food and the ashes of a life that had just been set on fire. But somehow I knew it was the start of something new, something honest and mine. Jasmine returned the next evening. She didn't knock, just walked in with that slow, deliberate glide she always used when she was trying to look composed. Her lipstick was perfect. Her heels were louder than necessary, but her eyes, they were searching, calculating. Grant followed behind her, silent. I said nothing as she sat across from me at the kitchen table, where I'd already placed the manila envelope. You have our attention, she said. No pleasantries, no faux warmth, just business now. Good, I replied, tapping the folder once. This contains the terms. They're non-negotiable. She opened it, skimmed the top page. Her lips twitched. You want me to repay all of it? Every dollar, $74,612, plus interest. I've calculated a 5-year repayment schedule, monthly installments. I'll have my accountant draft the payment structure and notarize the agreement once you sign. Jasmine let out a short, bitter laugh. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? I asked. Her eyes flicked to Grant. And you're okay with this? He didn't flinch. I'm not okay with what you did. She snapped the folder shut. This is ridiculous. You're trying to destroy me. No, I said. You did that all on your own. I'm just giving you a chance to handle it quietly. Jasmine crossed her arms. And if I don't sign, I report the fraud. The IRS investigates. Charges are filed. You'll be prosecuted for unauthorized use of corporate funds, impersonation of a business officer, and tax fraud. There will be subpoenas, discovery. Your emails and texts will become public record, and your face will be attached to every article. For the first time, I saw fear crack her mask. And the marriage? She said, still clinging to a last scrap of leverage. You're going to tear apart your own son's life to punish me? I'm not tearing anything, I said. I'm cleaning up the mess you left behind. She reached into her bag, pulled out a pen, and stared at the signature line. There's one condition, she said. No, I replied instantly. You're in no position to negotiate. She hesitated. Then she signed. I took the folder, slid it into my bag, and stood. There's a final document coming tomorrow, I said. It outlines your agreement to have no further contact with me, no visits, no messages. You'll stay out of my life completely. You can't do that, she whispered. I can, I said, and I am. She stood up slowly, as if the air had thickened around her. You'll regret this, she said. I looked her dead in the eye. Number, I regret trusting you, but that ends tonight. She left without another word. The door shut behind her like the final click of a vault. Grant didn't say anything. He just stayed standing in the doorway, staring into the dark, and I stood beside him, no longer afraid of the silence. We had both lost something that night, but only one of us had chosen to steal it. The rest, we'd rebuild, together, on truth this time, not illusion. Grant showed up 2 nights later with nothing but a duffel bag and a cardboard box filled with work files. He didn't say much, just set the box down on the old entryway bench, glanced around the living room like it was both familiar and foreign, and said, If it's okay, I'd like to stay here for a little while. I nodded. Of course. We didn't talk about Jasmine, not at first, not about the mess or the years lost or the guilt that sat between us like a third person in the room. Instead, I pulled the extra linens from the closet, made up the guest bed, the one that used to be his, and showed him where I kept the coffee now. That night, I heard him in the kitchen around midnight, heating something in the microwave. When I walked in, he was leaning on the counter, eating leftover roast straight from the container with a plastic fork. I forgot how good your cooking is, he said quietly. I smiled, poured 2 glasses of water, and sat with him in silence. No lectures, no rehashing. Just a mother and son trying to find each other again. He stayed on through the week, helped me carry boxes up from the basement, fixed the squeaky hinge on the front gate without me asking, took my car in for an oil change. It was in the small gestures that I felt him coming back, not just physically, but emotionally. He had been lost in someone else's world for so long, he didn't even realize how far he'd drifted. But now, he was home. And for the first time in years, so was I. The package arrived on a Tuesday. No note, no apology. Just a plain brown box with my name scribbled across the top in Jasmine's handwriting. Inside were the items she hadn't been able to return. Jewelry, clothes, handbags, tags still on most of them. A few clearly worn once and stuffed back into their boxes like she was trying to erase the evidence. Over the next week, more boxes followed. Shoes, scarves, that red dress she wore to the confrontation dinner, pressed, folded, and returned like a borrowed costume. The repayment agreement was notarized and filed, payments scheduled, the confession signed. And just like that, she was out of our lives. The divorce papers came 2 weeks later. Grant filed under irreconcilable differences. She didn't contest it, No long email, no final blow up, just a signature and silence, which to me said everything. But the win wasn't in the paperwork. It wasn't in the jewelry or the repayments or even the fact that she'd be haunted by that folder for years. The real victory was sitting across from me one morning, eating toast in his college sweatshirt, hair still messy from sleep, asking if I wanted to try a new coffee shop down by the marina. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and I realized something Jasmine never had. You can't steal love. You can't scheme your way into family. You have to earn it. And she never even tried. A month after the final payment cleared, I listed the house. The one Malcolm and I built together, the one I fought to protect. And yet, when the sign went up on the lawn, I didn't feel grief. I felt light, like I was finally allowed to imagine something for myself again. Grant blinked when I told him. Are you sure? I'm 66, I said. I've been cooking for other people since I was 20. I think I'm allowed to want a dishwasher that doesn't rattle like a freight train. He laughed. Fair. We toured a few places together, but I already knew the one I wanted. A corner condo near the marina, high windows, open kitchen, everything on one floor. The agent called it modern coastal. I called it mine. I put in the offer that same afternoon. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers. The day the movers came, Grant helped carry the last box to the car. He stood with me on the porch, the same porch where we'd once carved pumpkins and argued about curfews, and asked, "Any regrets?" I looked out at the garden one last time, the rosemary bush, the stone path, the bird bath Malcolm installed that never quite sat level. None, I said, because a house is just walls and roof and memory. But a life? That's what you rebuild. That's what you reclaim. And I wasn't clinging to the past anymore. I was finally walking towards something new. My first night in the condo, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on the balcony watching the boats drift across the harbor. The city lights blinked against the water. I didn't feel lonely. I felt sovereign, like I had quietly declared independence and no one had noticed until I was already free. The space was small, but perfect. Everything had its place. My books, my photos, my teacups, not a single item I didn't love. I'd kept only one photo of Malcolm and me, the one from our trip to Lisbon, both of us squinting into the sun, laughing at nothing. It sat on the kitchen shelf next to the spices. Grant stopped by the second evening with takeout and a bottle of champagne. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. We ate on the balcony, legs propped on a footstool, watching the water ripple like silk. I still don't understand how she got so far, he said after a while, not needing to name her. Because she started small, I said. That's how people like her work. They chip away. Your confidence, your voice, your place at the table, until you're the one asking if maybe you're overreacting. He was quiet. Then, I'm sorry I let her do that to you. You didn't let her, I said. You just didn't see it, until it was too obvious to ignore. We clinked glasses again. The lights from the boardwalk blinked softly beneath us. I'd found my way back to myself, and it was just the beginning. Now I'm curious about you. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever gone through something like this? Let me know in the comments. And while you're here, I've left 2 of my other stories on screen. I promise they'll surprise you. Thanks for watching all the way to the end.